Everybody, Invisiblekatana here with my review for Thor, Love and Thunder. Of course, this will have spoilers in the second half of the review, as the title says. But getting right into the non-spoiler segment of the video, it was good. I enjoyed it. I certainly don't love it. Honestly, I saw it and I was like, even when I was just watching, I was like, I don't like this as much as Thor Ragnarok. It's not. I feel like there are definitely a lot of good jokes, but I don't think it's as funny as Ragnarok. And the action certainly isn't as cool. Like, I would say I enjoyed honestly like 2 out of 5 of the shots because a lot of them they don't really show off some of the stuff in the trailer. But as far as the enemies, like Gor's the main villain, and then he has his minions. The minions are genuinely like they're just shadow monsters, and that's okay if you can see them. The first fight is genuinely at night, and it's like, oh, shadow monsters at night. It's like you can kind of see bits and pieces because there's lights around them, but it's like flames in the distance. Like everything felt so dark to me. I was just like, okay, it's a first fight. Cool stuff happens in every single fight. Like there's cool moments for sure, but as overall, there's not one where I'm just like, man, like nothing in this movie action wise lives up to the end scene in Ragnarok where Thor was like, oh, I don't need the hammer. I'm the like I can do it myself. And him running and having lightning just blasting off him, he's punching people with lightning coming out. That's probably the coolest thing he's done in the whole MCU. And this doesn't it really like it none of the action really compares to that. Like they do cool stuff, but nothing is as epic as that moment. And I felt like they were really close. They had a lot of stuff like and this is a movie with 2 Thors and nothing comes close. And I'm like, I feel like there was a missed opportunity for that to be the case. Like there's no reason you have 2 Thors and I'm not like, holy crap. They this moment of action, like, the comic book, hero team up always has like that epic thing. And I feel like that was kind of missing in this. At least between the actual heroes, there is something that happens that I think is cool, but that's more for spoilers. But overall, I still did enjoy the movie, but I was definitely like, yeah, this one, I'm not like losing my mind over it. Unfortunately, as much as I love Guns N' Roses, because that's kind of like the theme, like it's their music pretty much throughout the movie. And despite how much I love them, they're literally one of 2 bands that I've ever wanted to see in concert, which I got to see them. The other is, of course, AC/DC. But I love the music. Welcome to the Jungle is like probably my second favorite rock song ever. And it's just like every time it was in there, it just didn't really feel like it fit. It was like, okay, these are all songs, a lot of the songs they use, like you can easily use these for action. They're rock songs. A lot of rock songs can easily just be like, boom, action moment, and it's to the peak. And I was like, I just felt like they didn't fit in this. It was like, I don't know if it was like the pacing of the action combined with the song, because there are parts where it's like especially if it's like it's a musical moment and there's action happening, you kind of want to have things in a sense go to the rhythm of the music at least a tiny bit. And it really was one of those things where it felt like they just threw music on top of a fight scene. It felt like a montage, but it was clearly like an actual sequence of events. Like, in a montage you can throw any cool song on and it's like, okay, they're jumping and cutting. It doesn't have to fit with the music, you're just kind of seeing stuff. But it's, I don't know, it's a weird thing where it's like you have to follow what's happening in the fight and you have the kind of beat of the theme of the music going with it, and it's just like somehow it didn't work for me. I'm sure it worked for other people, but for me, I was like, this is my favorite Guns N' Roses song. It's in the first action sequence. It's like it's the first epic action moment, and I was just like, yeah, okay, I was like, I love the song and the action. Once again, the action was cool. It wasn't one of the 2 out of the 5. The action's cool, but it just didn't feel like it flowed together. It was just kind of the action was there, and then they threw an epic song in there, and it was like, I love this epic song, but it doesn't work as well for the moment. So unfortunately, that was the case there. Action wise, character wise, they had some cool stuff. Valkyrie and Jane Foster. That's a buddy cop movie we need, because they were super funny in this, and it was like they like have some really good chemistry. And I was like, I would love to see them have like a show or a movie where it's just like these 2 characters together and kind of what they do going forward, because they had some really funny moments. I thought it was cool too, because they didn't really know each other, but it was like, okay, like we kind of get that introduction of them actually meeting, and it's like, Jane being Thor, that's an interesting dynamic. It's not just like, oh yeah, this is my ex-girlfriend. It was like, this is my ex-girlfriend who's also Thor and stuff. Like, there's some elements there that are very interesting as far as who the characters are now. But overall, like I said, I did enjoy it. Gore, I was all right with. And it's not because of the whole comic thing. Obviously, he's not as cool as he was in the comics. But it was just also kind of meh for me. I was just like, all right, interesting villain. I don't care. Like I said, none of the, as far as the design and stuff like that, I was fine. He uses a black sword, so it's obviously points in my book. But it was just like, okay, for me, it wasn't anything special. Kind of, admittedly, how the theme of the whole movie, like the villain wasn't really that special. Didn't hate him or anything, but he's not like. Unfortunately, he's forgettable to me. So a lot of people said they like loved his character, and I was just kind of like, all right, like whole movie, I was just like okay with him, and I never felt like he was super epic. He doesn't have like an epic villain moment. I don't feel. So it was kind of like a pseudo letdown. Like I don't hate the character or anything like that. Like I said, I don't care about how different he is from the comics. It was just like in general, this version of him I was just kind of iffy on. Where I was like, I understand why he did it. The motivation wasn't the problem. It was genuinely just watching it and being like, yeah, it doesn't really appeal to me as a villain. I was like, I really didn't care to watch scenes with him in it because it wasn't really like epic stuff to see for me. It was just like, okay, these feel like lower points in the film where it could have just been like him doing something crazy. It was like constantly just him doing simple stuff until, the end of the movie. And it's like, okay, well, that's cool. But would have been nice to have seen that since they cut to him as the main villain. Would have been nice to see him do like much cooler things in the few moments we saw him before just the end fight. Let's build him up. Maybe it was kind of just like he's a villain who's there and he's kind of just waiting around, it feels like, and that's it. So getting into spoilers, that's the end of my non-spoiler segment. Enjoy the movie, check out the movie, at least see it once for sure. Spoilers though, I didn't think the fighting was good. Specifically, the first fight with Gore, I actually didn't enjoy much. My favorite fights were the fights against the gods and the actual final sequence where both Thors fought Gore, and the kids fought all the the shadow demons, which I personally enjoyed. I thought it was fine. They actually had a couple kids doing a few kicks in there and stuff, and I was like, okay, they got like some kids who actually had training in something, at least the very least gymnastics, to just do like some spin kicks. So I was like, okay, they threw some actual like moves in there, and it wasn't 100% just like the girl with the bunny, which I personally thought was probably my favorite part of that, for comedic purposes, and I thought it worked. I was like, okay, this is cool. Crazy moment. It's been the big running question. It's like, okay, well, Thor can just like be dishing out powers and whatnot. It's like, why didn't he do that here? Why didn't he do that there? But I just enjoyed it. I was like, okay, this is actually a really funny, but also still kind of cool moment. The kids were fairly brutal. I mean, they were like ripping through those things. I was like, okay, it's funny, but they're actually like ripping these demons apart. And I was like, okay, like it was a weird juxtaposition there, and I enjoyed that. So I was like, all right, that's cool. Thor fighting at the end, of course, Jane coming in at the in the final moment because he was getting his butt whooped. It's like, okay, I'm liking this. I also like that final fight because they have to get up close to each other. And I was like, all right, that's pretty cool. Like when they're throwing the hammer and stuff, it can be cool. I didn't think it was that great in this movie. Like I said, them on the moon, I was kind of disappointed in. Like epic color with the whole black and white thing, and like they're lit up by their powers and stuff. Like Valkyrie, having the lightning, that's what lights her up, starting from her hand. Thor with his lightning and Jane with hers as well. And it was just like, okay, this could be way cooler. You have two Thors, and I feel like there was not a single moment in this movie that was just like, holy crap, that was like a double Thor moment. They had it where they did lightning together like one time, but I was just like, there's so many, like, I feel like there are a million things that they don't do that's in the comics where it's like two characters who are super strong. They don't really do, like the seismic thing where like they hit the hammers together. Anything cool like that, I was like, I feel like there's a lot of lost potential where, especially, here's the biggest thing. There was one moment for sure where they should have had almost kind of a Captain America moment where they were kind of switching weapons back and forth and like throwing the hammer and like kind of just swapping it. Like they teased a little bit in Endgame where it was like, oh, like they called the wrong weapons. And I was like, they should have done a moment like that because they were doing like the running gag of their relationship and then Thor's relationship with the hammers having like emotions and stuff like that, which was funny, especially when they were in like the conference area and he was just like trying, and then Stormbreaker just slowly like came out of frame. He's just like, hey, that was probably my favorite one out of like all those moments. But they went through that whole culmination of it being like him dealing with two relationships. That could have been a part of it. That could have been a more epic moment from like this really silly thing that was happening where it was like all of a sudden they introduced the hammers as having emotions and stuff like that, which was out of nowhere. And I thought it was funny. I know it bothered some people, but I was like, I'm fine with it. I thought it was funny, but it didn't actually lead to much. It was kind of in tandem with his relationship with Jane, but they could have done something with it. Like I said, it's really the main thing is that they had this thing of the hammers having their own sets of emotions, and they could have done it, something at the end where like they all come together and then they can just swap weapons and they're doing cool combos, but they don't. I feel like every fight was like, all right, here's this person doing this, and then here's this person over here doing that. And I think the Greek fight was the only time that wasn't the case, where they were actually teaming up. And that was, I feel like that was it. Every other fight, it was like they were constantly spread apart, so they barely did any like combo moves. And I was like, they have two of the same character, both of which being like insanely powerful. And then you have Valkyrie as her own super powerful character. I was like, there's so much potential here for moves. Like they should have 100%, thinking back on Ragnarok and the bridge, they 100% should have utilized the lightning way more between the characters. Like show that they have different styles. Like they kind of showed that, but I feel like they barely showed it, honestly. Like they have two totally different weapons. He doesn't throw Stormbreaker. That's a whole big thing. And like once again, the fight against the gods, or at least like the guards that Zeus had, I think that was the biggest like show of power, that the separation between the characters. And that's mostly because he didn't even have Stormbreaker. He had to fight hand to hand, and she had to use Mjolnir. So it wasn't even really like, oh, they both have their weapons and it feels so different to watch him fight. It was just kind of like, okay, like I know the big difference is he can't throw his axe, or he technically can, but typically he does an axe swing and she actually throws in his stuff. But I was like, I feel like we see him do that so little, or it's just such a minute action compared to her throwing it. It's like it barely even feels like a comparison. He's doing this fight and she's throwing stuff and it's separating into like little metal mines that rip through things. I'm like, obviously I'm watching Jane. And so it's like, you got to have them both be really epic. And I feel like that was the problem. They were epic when they were, separate. But as far as together, it was just like, I feel like they didn't balance them out where they each had like this cool move here and then like a back and forth where it's just like, it keeps escalating how cool the fight scene is. And so that's what I think they missed out on, was like, you got two of the same character. Have that. Oddly enough, I feel like this would have, in a weird way, worked more as a series. Obviously, they would have had to have given it a buttload of money because they'd be cheaping out on these Disney Plus shows a little bit. Like, stuff has been rushed lately. Miss Marvel and Moon Knight for me was just like, both these shows have been rushed, and it's like I want them to do what they had in this, and just they could have spread it out, and we could have got some epic stuff. And I feel like that's the weird thing that was rushed through the film, where they were going on the mission. Gore was, once again, could have had more of him. We're just sitting back and waiting for this dude. He's like, all right, that was my plan. I hope he comes here, and that's all he does. We just wait, and I'm like, he killed. They have like 5,000 distress calls for the Guardians. Like, show him kill some of those people. Like show something. And he was just there. Like that's why I didn't enjoy him much as a villain. Like he had the scene with the kids where he like killed the shadow demons. Like, oh, it was cool a minute ago. Chopping heads off. And I was like, okay, that's cool. He's like this weird, creepy character, but kind of silly and funny and just effing with the kids. And I was just like, okay, cool. It would be nice to see him fight another god and kill them. Even if it was super easy. I mean, that would kind of build him up as this powerhouse where he has to fight 3 people at one time. So I feel like we needed more gore, personally. The action I just felt was lackluster. I like the ending with the kids, and I like, once again, ultimately that scene in the Battle of the Gods those were the coolest things. But we had like 5 fight sequences, and I was just like, the first big fight against the boss, I was just like, it's cool. I like that they're on the moon. Like when he slides and drags his blade into the ground, the dust floats up slowly. I was like, that's a cool visual, but it's just like, like the whole fight was like, oh cool, the big monsters are back. I thought that it was going to be like, holy crap, it's Gore. Obviously he has his monsters, that was from the beginning, but it would have been cooler if they could have at least fought through the demons, or we'll call them demons, and got to him and he was still powerful enough and they just had to keep going at him. And it was just like, okay, cool. He was fine, and the fight was pretty cool. The story was fun, but it was just like, something about it was just lackluster for me. And I was enjoying it bits and pieces. And oddly enough, I felt like the movie did. And this is a big contention for that first boss fight. I was like, okay, I'm kind of liking them getting to the planet. Obviously, them crashing into the planet, the goats. I laughed. I know that's definitely a hit or miss where it's like either you laugh or you don't. I laughed at them for sure, but that was my favorite one where they just hit the planet, and that made me think of Rick and Morty. But that was definitely my favorite one. It was like, okay, this is pretty funny. But going through, they get to the planet. It starts off cool, and the actual fight, I was just like, and the whole movie dipped. I feel like genuinely once the fight actually started, I don't know what it was, and I know the animation was weird there because they were doing something with them like kind of floating. Like it was weird. It was like something was going on where it was either they slowed stuff down or they sped it up, and I was just watching like, it looks slightly. I can tell it's off, but it wasn't enough to be like crazy jarring or anything. But it was like some weird part in it where it was just like CG. It, like, obviously I knew it was CG, but it was something about it just like hit at a certain way, and I was like, something that they're doing here makes it look extra fake. So I don't know if it was because the whole, technically, like in those scenes that was 100% green screen, so maybe something about it where I could just tell it went from at least one real thing there to like literally nothing. Maybe that was it. I don't know what it was, but something during that fight where they would like get thrown up, it was just like all CG. And I think that's what it was. It was like some part of my brain was just like, we just went from like at least one real human being to 100% everything I'm looking at. It's just a CG movie right now. And maybe just clicked for some reason. But after that, I genuinely felt like the movie kind of dipped. One, the action wasn't that great. And this was like the boss fight, or at least the first boss fight. But it was still kind of like, this isn't that good. And then, of course, they lost and they go back. And then they, they had the dramatic scene, which was good. But it was just like something about this feels off. It just like felt weird and it felt off. And also, why couldn't he call Stormbreaker? I thought that was really weird. I was like, sure, he got teleported, but he like the whole point is that he can just summon it. So maybe that's not a thing from as big of a distance. I don't know what the deal was with that, but I thought that was super weird. It was like, well, even if he got it, he would still be able to recall it. Like they didn't put anything in there where he would just have to sink it into the ground with the shadows like off rip. They just didn't do that. And it was like, that would have been something. Cause now I'm just like, well, so what if he got blasted across the universe? The whole thing, they literally have an entire sequence of that in the second movie where he's going through the portals to other planets across the universe. And then Mjolnir is like flying out and then it's like, oh, he's back. And then it turns around in midair just to find him. So I was like, oh, that's weird. Cause that's in my brain a lot. Is probably one of the only good moments of the second Thor movie. So it's like, oh, it's weird that that's missing. But the action I thought was meh during that moment, and it just dipped. And then it kind of picks back up. It goes off, and he has the kids and stuff. And I was really curious because I'm like, how is this actually gonna work? And then he has a kid army, and they have like Zeus's lightning. Also, him losing Stormbreaker so that he couldn't use the Bifrost, but he uses like Zeus's lightning bolt and then like swirls around him like a teleporter. I thought that was actually super cool because I was like, oh, that was a random thing where it was like, this is how he does it, where he I guess flies because he flies like a lightning bolt through space. That's the only thing I could think of because I'm like, it's a thing that whirls around him and it looks like it would teleport him, but I'm like, I know that's not what it just did because that would just literally be out of nowhere. So I guess he shot through space like as fast as a lightning bolt, and it was like personal hyperspeed, I guess. So I thought that was cool. He gives the kids a bunch of Zeus lightning powers, and they're picking up wrenches and all that crap and destroying monsters. And it was pretty cool. It was a decent sequence. And he's fighting, getting his butt whooped. And then, of course, Jane comes in and they have the ending moment. They have the ending fight, which I thought was pretty cool. I wish he actually fought with the lightning bolt broken into like 2 daggers. A lot more. I think that would have been cool choreography for his character. Once again, just have him do it and be like having lightning come off him at the same time as well. But they go through. The portal opens up. Once Gore walks in, they did something that I really wasn't expecting, which was he went through the portal and then all 3 of them got teleported. And I was like, that's really weird. Like, what's the point of it being a portal if everyone's just in the room, or I guess within like those 30 feet? Because obviously the kids didn't get warped in. But it was just like he went through the portal and for whatever reason, they just got sucked in too. And I was like, that seems odd. Like the whole point of it is that it's a portal to it's in a specific spot. And then he walked through and then they just got shot through as well. Great sequence though. I always love a cool infinite space with like a tiny bit of water. That's always nice to look at. And then of course, they had broken the sword. Jane pulled a sweet move where she gathered the pieces and just smashed both the hammer and the sword. And then of course, that was the final thing that ended up killing her at the end. But I thought that was a really cool way to end it. And then of course, they say he's possessed, I guess, by the sword. That's his whole thing. And so once they broke it, he was, more susceptible, I guess, to reason. So he brings his daughter back, which was cool. I love the visual, like the actual stone for eternity, because I was like, that's a great representation. That's like exactly what it looks like in the comics, even just the statue. And then of course they got to it, and it was literally like, that's cool. Like it's hard to get that wrong, but I loved it just from the statue. I was like, oh, that's a great way to represent that. It's like the infinite space of all eternity. But they have like the little half opera, the what the heck is it? Phantom of the Opera. I'm like, opera of the what? Phantom of the Opera mask on her. And it's like, that's how they represent like where the facial structure is. And I thought they did a fantastic job with that, just from the statue alone. But I thought that was really cool. We have who is officially named Love at the end of this movie. She pops out. She has the powers of eternity. Apparently, she can shoot lasers out of her eyes. And we get, of course, the recap at the end. Sif is around, which is super cool. Jamie Alexander, I think, is great. It was sweet to see her in Loki, and I was very surprised to see her show up in this. And she got her arm chopped off, which they didn't replace, but I feel like they got some cool metal idea coming up because a bunch of characters. Thor even loses his arm in the comics, so maybe they'll do that for Sif, and she'll just get like a cool metal arm or whatever. But I like the ending. Also, Heimdall has a kid that came out of nowhere, which I thought was really funny. But I was just like, okay, just want to randomly reference that because they just threw that in like it's Heimdall's son. From where? From who? but there were just a bunch of kids, and he was one of them. So he got his powers. He's training now to be a warrior. A bunch of other kids are being trained under Valkyrie, so that's pretty cool. Jane, of course, gets to go off because she had the powers of a god, and she was technically Asgardian as Thor, I guess. She now gets to go to Valhalla. I'm curious what they'll do with that. If they will go with her just being out, or I guess it would be if she wants to come back. If Natalie Portman wants to come back and play the character, she would end up kind of following her comic storyline, which leads her into becoming another Valkyrie, which would perfectly line up with that buddy cop movie I'm looking for, because they were funny in this, and I was like, if they follow the storyline and they're like, yeah, Jane decided she doesn't want to stay in Valhalla, but she does want to help people still, and it's like, she wants the powers of a god. She wants to be more than just mortal. She's had that experience now. It's like, I don't want to go back. I want to be a hero. So boom, she could be the new Valkyrie. Buddy cop team up. Fantastic film. Just saying. I hope that's exactly what they do, because I love them together in this. They were really funny. And I was like, I love that they've never met in any other movie, but right in this, it was like, she's the new Thor. And it was like, yeah, we're buddies. And it was like, I like this. This is pretty cool. So hopefully we get that. I think that'll be a fantastic film. But all in all, enjoyable. What was that first post-credit sequence? Something silly. Oh, Hercules. I hope they do. There's another thing that happens in comics. If you watch Comics Explained, it's like Rob's favorite moment in all of comics, and it's a pretty badass moment for sure. So it would take forever for them to even think of getting to that sequence. But I was like, if they ever wanted to just kill off Thor, Chris Hemsworth was like, I'm done. They just want to end that version of him. There's probably a million moments for a million characters how they've died, but this specific moment I'm thinking of is very good, and it involves Hercules. So that would be cool. I think it's Hercules. It might not even be Hercules, but they could totally put it in there. It doesn't matter. The point is, if they want to kill off Thor, this very specific moment at least has Thor in it for sure. So they could do that, and they could do it with Hercules if they decide not to keep him around forever. But that's my thoughts on the movie. I enjoyed it. I'm not even honestly hyped to see it again. If I mean, totally, like I won't. Not until it's on Disney Plus, and I'll definitely watch through it again and see if I like it. I feel like it's a lot like Multiverse of Madness. I was like, I enjoyed it, but I'm like, I feel like I would kind of like it more knowing exactly what type of movie it is, because obviously your expectations are, you want it to be more, and it just wasn't that. Like in general, it was just like, okay, it just didn't even. I feel like it wasn't even like close to matching Ragnarok. It wasn't just like, it doesn't match it. It's not as epic as this. It was like, it just felt like it didn't even honestly come close for me. It was just like, it was good, and I'm glad I saw it, but it's ultimately just like, cool. So those are my thoughts on Thor: Love and Thunder. Who the F knows where they're gonna go? Like, also, Love is actually Chris Hemsworth's actual daughter in real life, if you didn't know that. So I don't know what they're gonna do with that. He's gonna be Dad Thor, and he's gonna be raising, the newest Asgardian, and we get to see her powers. I'm sure that's gonna be a thing in some way, shape, or form. But I'm curious. Young Avengers, it's possible they might just toss her on there. They need a Thor-based character, and now they have one. So I mean, obviously she doesn't have the lightning, but Child of Thor, that's that representation, but she has different powers. How do I live up to the status of my dad as a superhero? Oh, the classic Young Avengers type stuff. So we'll see what happens with that all in all. But I enjoyed it. Would love to know your thoughts on it. So please put your comments down in the comment section below. Let me know your favorite parts about it, your least favorite parts about it. We'd love to know what you guys think they're actually going to do with Jane Foster based on where her storyline is and possibly her becoming Valkyrie. We'd love to know your thoughts on Gore the God Butcher. I, of course, wish it was related to the symbiotes. I wish everything symbiote-based that we have seen in all these dumb Sony movies was something better. I honestly, the symbiote stuff is like my favorite part of Spider-Man, not just because it's the best costume ever for Spider-Man. It's just the patches on the top. It's like, I don't know what it is. They're so nice. But all the symbiote stuff is, we need it better. So I guess it's good that it's not the symbiotes just yet. I want them to actually build it up. Who knows if Sony can even, or if Marvel can even do that. I know they cheated with Spider-Man, and they're like, we're just gonna go ahead and take the symbiote for now. But is that whole thing tied to it? Like, they still wouldn't have Venom. There's so many questions with that. It's such a shame. If they skip straight to Agent Venom, maybe they can make it work. I don't know how, but who the F knows? Who the F knows? Anyway, Thor: Love and Thunder. We'd love to know your thoughts on this, so please put your comments down in the comment section below. And of course, thanks for watching.